Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. All right, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Deepen, and I am pastor of the Village Church. And across from me is my good friend Andy Littleton from Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona.
Hey.
And we've been doing this podcast for a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of episodes.
Years.
And what we've done in that is gotten a lot of people from different places listening. And all the way to Japan, to places in Iraq, I noticed people are listening. One of the things after doing this for 3.5 years is I am interested in what you think and if you actually are listening. We would love an email. If you're listening in the United Kingdom, we have a bunch of people who listen in the United Kingdom. Would you send us an email? It's faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com and say, hey, I'm listening. I really enjoy this. You guys are hilarious or whatever. It would be encouraging. It would help us be more like, yeah, I love this. I want to do this.
Wow.
This is good. So,
Wow, look at that. That's a bold ask. I like it. And today we're as promised, we're talking about anxiety, and the other connected negative emotions, anger especially. They are all one. They all stem from the same sort of questions about God and ourselves, and digging into that. Eric, especially as I confessed at the beginning of the podcast, I look up to him on this issue. Really glad to hear from him even more on this. So thank you, Eric, for all you've invested over the years in these things to where you can just on the spot share the kind of things that you did. So I see this as extremely valuable, and I would just encourage everybody to stay tuned into this one all the way through.
yeah. Yes, please do. And in the show notes, I'll put a couple links to Healing the City podcast that kind of express some of these ideas in shorter chunks, so people can digest those too.
Awesome. All right. Enjoy.
All right. Thanks. Check. I keep forgetting I'm supposed to fix those, and then I don't do it. I need to order. Wow, maybe you can use your skill. Right now, we are watching Andy fix one of the mics. It's overused, but we need some elastic, some rubber bands or something.
Watching in audio.
And
almost spilling.
Well, my plan at some point here.
I think I need to go up a little bit.
Go ahead and go up. You need to go up in volume.
That's what I'm saying. Try that. Check. That's more like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think did you listen to the last podcast at all? I think
to the beginning of it.
I think I fixed it.
I think you did. And as has been acknowledged many times, how much I love when our sound checking is on at the beginning. I'm sure it's a very authentic thing to do, but I listened to us trying to fix it, as did everybody else. And, that's it's a thing I have to let go of.
Yeah, there's some things.
One of many.
One of many when you're working.
Anxiety producing.
When you're working with me.
Things I deal with. One of many. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oddly enough, what we're here to talk about.
I try to live out my value of authenticity. I want to be authentic.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So, I cut out a lot, actually.
Did you? There was probably a couple minutes of that.
Yes.
Authenticity there.
I only gave people a few seconds of authenticity.
Apparently I want less.
The Bieber, the last podcast.
The Beebcast.
I mean, obviously a little bit of clickbait there with his name, but it shot up fast.
Oh, yeah?
One, I think people are like, thank you, Faith Over Breakfast is back. We can listen to something new. But also, people were interested.
Yeah, we got some we got some good questions from
Did we
Corey?
Emails?
Yeah, but for next time.
Oh, for next time.
For talking about The Chosen.
Oh, cool.
But so thank you for engaging with that. We got a couple really great questions about that. So
I would like to say, hey, yes, next week is The Chosen.
Yep.
We should have my father on because he loves The Chosen.
He does.
He's just a Chosen fanatic.
Really?
Yeah.
That I didn't see that coming.
Let's have him on. I'll see if he'll come. Would you be okay with him coming on?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, okay.
I
Why
can
not?
cut that out if you say no. But
Yeah. No, that's fine. So I've been watching the free version that they live streamed where the producer Dallas is always selling merch.
Yes.
And I know this isn't our topic, but it's driving me a little crazy, that part.
The merch part.
But even my daughter is like, "Oh no, he's going to talk about another hoodie." But here's the question: does your dad?
He doesn't have any merch.
Does he have any merch? Does he have the hoodie?
I should get him.
Dude, get him
hoodie.
the one. There's one that says "Trouble" and it shows Jesus and all the disciples on a hoodie. Get that for him.
I will. I think I will.
I think that's
a great idea. I'm going to do that. That's awesome.
Interesting. It's okay. That's next week.
That's next week. Well, and we need a preview. Hey.
Yep. Enjoy. So anyway, thank you all for sending questions. People were too anxious to send questions about this one.
They were too anxious because we're going to talk about anxiety.
Yeah.
And how, at least last week, the thing that both of us kind of concluded was it seems that the people, including ourselves, that we engage with both in and outside of our church, either verbally acknowledge that anxiety and depression are something that overwhelm them, or as we listen to them.
Is it moving?
Yeah, it's still moving.
Okay.
I believe so. It's acting like it's moving. That's a good question.
Sorry, I just noticed that. No, it's kind of frozen up top.
Did we? No. Let's see something. You're right. What happened? It's acting like it is, but test. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there we go.
Check.
All right, guys, we're so sorry for that break. I'll cut it out.
Back from a realization that everything that was moving on the computer screen had stopped.
Yeah, we were a little afraid we weren't recording. We didn't want to record on anxiety. We were a little anxious about a recording.
Yeah, I am watching the screen, dealing with anxiety as we're trying to talk about it.
Anyway, so we just thought, let's just do a podcast where you and I just talk about anxiety.
Yeah.
And how you might face it, or at least begin that process.
Yeah, and I think we must acknowledge that, honestly, you've put in a lot more work in general into if there's an emphasis of the village, it's been a higher emphasis on, what would you say, the inner life.
Yes.
And though that is deeply important to me, I've spent a lot of time plowing into some things. A higher emphasis at mission has been the mission, what are we doing? And I really like that our churches are friends, and there's some overlap because I think you all have given us a gift. In fact, just now before this, you were willing to enter into some stuff with me, and I'm grateful for that. So I don't know. I feel like I have thoughts, but I just want to acknowledge your years of work on this.
No, thank you.
Honestly, because I look up to you in regard to your insight here. So, yeah, I mean that. So, yeah, we're reflecting back, and there was a theme. I forget how it came up in the Beaver podcast.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you just listen to both, you'll know. We don't. It's been a bit.
Yeah.
But we were talking about the past year, I suppose, must have been, and just that one of the common themes behind all the various frustrations, you could take any side of a political issue or whatever, is when I've drilled down, tried to, with myself, with others, we're anxious.
Yeah.
Deeply, deeply anxious. Yeah. That's what I'm seeing. And yeah, that's what's not being talked about is not enough.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Well, and I think what I've experienced in just, let's say in the secular world, the world outside of the church, and it's inside the church too, is that we're acknowledging that depression, anxiety,
high
levels of suicide, anger, all these things exist and are elevated.
Yeah.
But in general, nothing seems to fix them.
Yes, this is where we were. Yeah, that is where we were in the last one. Right. And for sure I've seen those articles about how these things are on the rise, and
Right.
but there doesn't seem to be a solid good path.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are the paths you see being presented?
Well, I think one, different forms of therapy.
Yep.
And medication.
Yep.
And then if you go out of the professional world, drugs,
Yeah. Alcohol,
distraction. I mean, I think, binging movies, living in a different world, staying up super late and then, not getting enough sleep, like aggravating
video
games,
various forms of needing to control something else.
Yep.
Right? Like if I can get this under control, then that would be under control.
Well, what's really interesting
I'm
is
presently dealing with, right?
Yeah, well, you're present. Yeah, I mean, when you're saying that, and I was thinking, yeah, I have started working out with my wife. Well, I've been working out all year, but I moved up a level, and my son joined us, and we work out every day now instead of 3 times a week or whatever. And so I was getting some more free weights, and what I found is that it's hard to pick up free weights, and it's hard to pick up the particular kinds of weights and things I want because everybody's buying them. And I think exercising has become a way of like, well, if I'm physically fit, this will help me deal with some of my anxiety. And there's some truth to that, but that's also become a focus. Like I can control my body. And so I can do that.
Absolutely. Man, I feel like I saw a metaphor for what we do or how we feel a couple blocks away from here. Right now, when I was driving over, there was a blind man crossing the street.
Okay.
And he had a bag of groceries, and he had his stick, and he was walking slowly, methodically, just using his stick, doing the, groping forward best he could, but felt pretty confident in his stick and his ability. He got to the corner where there was a transient guy who was drinking a bottle of alcohol and acting erratic. And that guy started to speak to him. I don't know what he said, right? But he was intoxicated, and that man tried to just keep moving methodically. And then he stopped, gathered his groceries in his hand, and started running. The blind man, with just flailing his stick in front, just started running.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a terrible thing to watch. And the guy didn't pursue him, and he was able to slow down a little bit later. But this but I feel like that's something of a way that I sometimes feel. Right? Like I don't have all the information. I feel like I'm moving methodically along. Some boogeyman, right, says something to me. And I'm just running with a blind man's stick, just hoping to get away.
Yeah.
Just get away.
That's a good picture of the way many of us feel.
It was a powerful, sad, scary, powerful thing to watch for a second on my way over. But it hit me right away. I understand how that man feels.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's a great picture, Andy. I mean, I think, and I think what we're trying to run away from and even hold tightly to our stick is the fact that everything we do has a motivation of fear. Like if you think biblically, you end up in the garden narrative. There's a moment where they were naked and afraid. Adam and Eve in Genesis, after eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, find themselves in that space before God, naked and afraid. And that's mostly where we all are. The choices we make are motivated out of that. What's striking to me, and this is, it creates some theological issues, but you jump out of the garden into Cain, Cain and Abel. And Cain is told by God after the fall and everything that sin is crouching at the door to devour him, but he can master it. There's a choice there. There's a power still in us to master our inclination
Right.
to run, even while we feel naked and afraid.
Right.
What I think in the modern world we believe is that we have no power over our anxiety and we have no power over fear. What we've been told, and this comes from a naturalistic kind of worldview, is we've been told is that we're just a conglomerate of, neurons and hormones firing, and it's done incorrectly now in your body, and we just need to adjust it.
It's just, the machine is just out of tune.
Yeah.
But the machine is something that just came about from nothing and has no meaning.
Right.
So does it mean to be in tune?
Right.
Yeah.
And it completely denies that there's a soul.
Yes.
And the soul is the essence of who you are. And it is the thing that will last. And it is part of the significant part of your image bearing. I think your physical part and your mind all bear the image of God. I don't think there's some side thing, but the soul is the eternal part. We are beings now who have an eternalness to us. We had a beginning, but we will exist.
Right.
How we will exist is a different question.
Right.
And so, I don't know. I think that there's this conflicting feeling inside of us of maybe we could do something about this, but we feel powerless to figure that out. That's usually what I hear from people. I got to figure out how to deal with my anxiety. My anxiety is controlling me. I had a panic attack. I took this medication. I did this. I need to get control of myself. I need to figure it out. And I think that's part of being human, is wanting to figure it out.
Yeah, it's so here when it comes to the therapy side of things, I don't think either of us are just down on therapy.
No, I believe in therapy.
And so one of the things is you try to understand the narratives or whatever, right? And as you know, we were doing this before the podcast. But there's some power in that. There's some value in saying I'm putting this person's face on this other person, or in saying I'm afraid of this because I experienced this very painful thing and I don't ever want to feel that again. There's value in identifying, naming, understanding that.
Sure.
But that isn't enough to just figure it out.
Right.
Right. Like I've experienced, I can know what it is. Right. I mean, I was talking to another pastor here in town who's newer, and he lived through a civil war and in a couple decades ago, I guess. But in moving to Tucson, the airplanes that fly over us are the ones that his country was bombed by, the same plane. So he of all places he had to move, he has to hear them go over him, and it brings the same feeling back. And he knows what the feeling is. Mm-hmm. He knows it's kind of a PTSD. He knows it's not, these planes are just here to land, but it doesn't change the fact that you feel the feeling you have. Mm-hmm. That knowledge, it helps. Mm-hmm. It helps.
Right.
So what more?
So how can you deal with your anxiety? Like, what are you going to do? I mean, ultimately, if you want the overarching answer is that in our brokenness, we're motivated by our fear in everything that we do. Yeah. But that Jesus does invite us into a relationship with him, and his invitation is to be motivated by love. And, 1 John 3:16, this is how we know what love is, that Christ died for us. Like, that becomes the center, the invitation. Now, moving from fear to love is a process in which I think we maybe have short-circuited a few things in the modern world to get there that the ancient world knew better. Right. But I think that isn't what the world is saying, and that what you need to replace your anxiety with, or what can be replaced, is with the love of Jesus. That's the answer. A lot of times what we've said is just to apply that as a Band-Aid, but it is the truth. The only way to deal with your anxiety is to live in the love of Jesus. Right. That's the only way to have no anxiety. Yeah. So how do you get there?
And I was going to say, and that though sounds wonderful, but feels sporadic or elusive.
Right.
Here's what it can feel like for me. It feels like when things are peaceful, I'm experiencing the love of Jesus, and when they're not, I'm not. Now, I know even the 23rd Psalm clearly states that that is not the case, that he is with me, and maybe even more powerfully in the valley of the shadow of death, because that's where the rod and the staff comfort me.
Right.
He is with me. And theologically I get, but experientially it's hard. How do you make that connection that when I feel I need this comfort, I'm in the love of Jesus?
Right. Well, I think for me personally, I think that what I hear from people is I have anxiety and I want to fix it.
Yeah.
And I'd like it to be fixed tomorrow.
Yes.
And I think that comes from our modern world, that everything can be fixed overnight.
Right.
I think and so we can move on to just being happy.
Uh-huh.
And I think you have to realize that isn't God's intention.
Mm-hmm.
God's intention isn't to go around and snap his fingers and everything's better all the time.
Sure.
Right. That you live in a broken world. And mostly we should probably just do 18 podcasts on the kingdom of God to begin to talk about the breaking in of the kingdom of God. That's what you are when you step into the kingdom, is an announcer of God's reality now and in the coming future. Right. And that's important.
Right.
And dealing with your anxiety is understanding who you are as a person now in the kingdom of God. Like that you are making an announcement of a new reality, and that's a process within a broken world.
I 100% agree with you, and have found that very difficult to do and access as well. Right. But something that I'm not against propositional truths, and so I really am not. Yeah. But there's something that we have done, maybe in the modern world, maybe in the Western world, where, and especially in the church, where we've made it about acknowledge the facts, right? And then that's it. Right. And if you have the facts and the arguments, that's what you need. But that you're talking about a lived reality of belonging. Mm-hmm. And as you're talking about, I assume you've experienced many religious circles in which that wasn't pressed into at all, right? What are some of the key things, like, I don't know, teach me about this, please. Okay. Like, on getting into that.
Okay, so let's just break it down. I'll just talk about it. You can ask me questions. So, all right, here we go. Happy to. So, without taking the next 3 hours, so I'm going to do this short.
Ooh, okay.
Right. But Peter, in his letter, is very clear that the enemy prowls around looking for whom he can devour. Yep. That devour point is your emotion. Anxiety, fear, and anger are the places that he will attach, or the enemy, I think the spiritual world, attaches itself to. I always say that your emotions are the arrows in which the enemy rides on. Your negative emotions. So when you have anxiety, fear, anger, the enemy is looking to build strongholds in your heart and your soul. And when he finds a stronghold, and I know we're talking about the spiritual world right now, and some people are like, eh.
And I've even confessed to you, like, because of my church history, I get this little radar goes up, but I want to even just acknowledge with those who are with me in that, there's something to it. Like, stick with it. Yeah.
And those emotions have lies attached to them. Mm-hmm. And as you experience the world, those lies are about you. Those lies are about the people that you're involved in. And in particular, those lies are about how God involves himself with you. Yeah. If you can just get there, that you can understand, here's when I feel anxious, here's what I hear about myself, and here's what I hear about others, and here's what that is, the implication there about God and how he's going to be involved in my life. If you can even just understand that, you can at least know there's a spiritual and, I would say, physiological conflict happening in your body. Right. And you have to be awareness helps. The second thing I would say about this from a physiological and neurobiological position is that you and I are built to survive.
Right.
So when there's danger, our nervous system does a couple things. We either freeze, right? You run, or you fight. Right? Your nervous system will do this. Your subconscious is always active, right? In order to survive, you have to take these emotions, anxiety and fear and anger, and you have to put them somewhere so that you can function.
They are usable tools.
Yes.
They can either control you or you can master them.
Right. And there's a narrative. So when you're angry or you're anxious, there's a narrative going on in your subconscious, and it's constantly going on. And you don't know about it. And what it does is your whole body and your mind does not want to deal with things. Because of the fall, it thinks it's safer to bury these in different ways. And so people who struggle with chronic pain or, weird physical maladies like diarrhea and all these kinds of your body will figure any other way to deal with it than actually you talking about it, you expressing it, you handling it, because there isn't a lot of space for you to do that. So it builds and it builds and it builds to the when you feel anxiety, the emotion becomes so overwhelming that you don't know what to do anymore. Right.
Right. And I know I have been there, and I know people who are there. Yeah. So
there are a couple ways to deal with it. I can give you a tool right now that I have developed and I'm using, and I'll just give you one aspect of it. It's super helpful, and I've been assigning people this, and I think I even assigned one of your pastors this.
I think you might have.
And it's simply called what I call negative emotion mind mapping. And what it's doing is it's taking a particular emotion, your anxiety, how you feel it in your body. You put it in the middle of a piece of paper. I'm anxious, and when I feel anxious, my shoulders tighten. I'm angry, and when I'm angry, my temples just feel like they throb. Whatever it is, people have so many physical ways of experiencing it. Physical ways of experiencing anger and anxiety and fear are clues to you.
Right.
Because sometimes you may not even know, I'm not angry. Well, then why am I clenching my fists?
I press my teeth with my tongue.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
My jaw gets tight and I press and I've learned that when I'm doing that, I have to ask questions of myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then you just begin to on that mind map, you just draw a line off and you take a circle. And so if I were to say, I'm angry, I'll just give an example. I'm angry and I clench my fist, and then, okay, well, Andy Littleton, he's one of the people I'm angry. Oh, and
right.
The dog. Okay, the dog. And you're just drawing little lines off that. And then it's Andy Littleton, well, he's always got problems. Okay. He never talks about, to me. And I'm just making these things up. Right. So you just mind map out how you're feeling about things, what you think about this person. You get it. And then you get all the things you're angry about.
Yeah. And
you can rate those with intensity. But what it does, just that simple act with your brain is an extraordinary experience, because your brain, your subconscious is spilling out things that it's not thinking about.
Sure.
All of a sudden you're slowing down. It's kind of the best way to explain it is you normally breathe and you don't think about it.
Right.
But you can stop your breath. You can hold it for a while, right? Well, that's what mind mapping is doing, is you're taking what's just constantly going in your subconscious and saying, I'm going to hold my breath right now and write it out and see what's happening and bring it into the light and be more conscious of it. That in itself is really helpful, just in dealing with your anxiety. That's a step. Now, the other step that I always, I suggest and is built into journaling this before God with some rawness, laying out your anger about things and letting the Father handle those for you. Listen, he doesn't care. He already knows about it. So you don't have to protect him.
And by doesn't care, he's not going to be surprised or thrown off by you being unholy.
Right.
Yeah.
And he wants that relationship.
Yeah.
God is a relational God. We can make that proof. We don't need to do that already. God is relational. Bible says he's relational.
And he's extremely, I don't know, durable. He of all people that can take a beating,
right?
He's got more capacity,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
And so you can put that there, and you can walk through confession, and you can walk through listening to the Spirit of God. And if you want to listen to the Healing the City podcast, you can learn more about the details and practices of these things. But just the expression of that, the beginning of that, will help you begin to say, okay, this is at least, I have words for my anxiety. I have a sense of what's happening. I know that it's not just this one moment, but my anxiety or my anger is just spread out all over these places. Right. I would say the other thing that you have to realize, and this is something you have to work through, and was talking to you beforehand, is that over and over again, you and I deal with injustice.
Right.
We get no justice. And I always laugh because I have this conversation with people in our church, and I preach this, that there is no justice, and so there's no such thing as social justice.
Right.
Because if I were to kill your daughter, and then I was put in prison, and then I was electrocuted, and I died.
Yeah.
You didn't get any
justice.
justice.
Get your daughter back.
No, you didn't get your daughter back. Like there's no justice. The only justice. Yeah. And so as human beings who are living in the fall, longing for things to be made right, the only spot that it's made right is on the cross, and with the future hope of Jesus returning to make it all right.
And that he could actually resurrect from the dead.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the only reason you and I can be friends, and even for me to harm you, and then you and I to be friends, is because the cross sits in front of me and you. And justice for what I've done to you is on the cross. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't...
that it doesn't matter.
There aren't consequences for my actions.
So how can... that's rich. That's good. How can... This is the quote where my head goes. Like, good. There's the... I'm feeling anxiety. I'm dealing with things. I'm trying to mind map. I'm trying to, acknowledge the cross. But then... there are others in the world, and they're coming toward me with their stuff too,
yes.
Right? So I hit them with my stuff, and then I'm trying to do this internal work, and they're hitting me with their stuff, and maybe they are, or maybe they aren't, maybe they can see it, maybe they can't. How do you do, like, it seems like if you have two people who are totally on the same page about the cross stands between us, you have a really good shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you coach people through these interactions?
Triggering interactions might be a good way of thinking.
Sure.
Well, so I mean, I can give you an example from my own life is, I think my mom would acknowledge this. She's a very question asking person.
Yeah.
And doesn't always have good boundaries. And so she pushes on things. And so all my life, I felt like I haven't had my own private space. But I didn't really realize how that affected me over time until I began to go through these journaling processes to deal with different things in my life. So when I interact with my mom, and before I kind of thought through this stuff, she'd create a lot of anxiety for me because she asks questions that feel invasive.
Right.
And make me feel like I'm a kid.
Right.
And it's very triggering. And so then what I give her is a wall. Like, no, you're not allowed in here. This is my special place. Right. You don't get to have everything. Right.
Right.
And there's an anger there and an anxiety. And then I would leave feeling all worked up. Why am I worked up?
Right.
It's not like she was saying mean things to me. So if I've processed through some of this, so now I've mind mapped it, I understand it, I've journaled before God, I've listened to the Spirit of God, I begin to write out who I am as a person and what God's called me to. All of a sudden now, I go sit with my mom and I hear her, talk, or I go with this is even more triggering. My daughter tends to be this way a little bit. She likes to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And so I'm hard on her times, and she doesn't mean anything by it, but it has to do with the fact that I have this commitment to not being, you can't get to my private space.
And this is how we damage the next generation, right? In different ways, is because we're responding out of our stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I might say, well, I struggle with anxiety because every time my daughter asks me questions, it makes me anxious.
Right.
Well, what it is that I feel like she's invading. Okay, so now I have that. Well, Jesus, this is the part about self-mastery. Like, there is a part where I have to make a choice, even though it doesn't feel good.
Right.
And that is to say, I am not going to put a barrier between my daughter or my mother. But that doesn't mean I have to submit to them. And maybe more with, like, say with my mom or someone in a power position like that, I can say, I'm really uncomfortable here with this, your questions. I don't know how to handle them. What are you looking for, Mom? Or what are you looking for? I can be vulnerable
Right.
knowing that Jesus is enough for me.
Right.
Now, I may not feel like he's enough for me, but what he's saying to me is like, serve your mom, serve your daughter, serve your wife, serve all these people who want part of you the way I would serve them.
And there's probably a couple of categories of people. I would assume that your mother, knowing her, like, wants to love you well.
Oh,
and
yeah.
is
Deeply.
committed to you. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Like, and she's coming out of her own journey and and she's a deep person who wants to know a lot and maybe cross some boundaries of the daughter or the mother-son relationship.
Sure.
Just trying to do what she's good at anyway.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you love me. There's a lot of people experiencing where they're like, I don't think they love me.
Right. They don't think they're not.
My mom, they could say, I don't think my mom does love me. She wants to hurt me.
Right. And there you have the acknowledgement of what your experience is, if you're willing to walk through that and how you're triggered in that and what happens to your nervous system and what you're experiencing. And you do create good boundaries. You do say, I can't be in this space.
Right.
Or I need to step away, or this is not a good place for me to be right now.
Right.
And being okay with that. Being aware of, like, I think a lot of times what the problem with anxiety is that you, for instance, go around with your nervous system heightened, and I go around with my nervous system heightened, and your wife and my wife, and we all have and then we get together, and our nervous systems are heightened, and boom.
Sometimes,
it's just firing everywhere, and so now everyone else is anxious.
Oh man, I mean, it's an interesting thing to when you're in that kind of space, as I've been many times, and then you like have people over for dinner, and you just feel this whole thing in the room of like, so who or what are we gonna? There's just like all the people's walls, and it's like And so it's wonderful when you don't feel that, right? But sometimes you do, whether there's been some problem or not. Sometimes it's just there, by nature of just where you're at, how the enemy's dealing with you, and it's complex, and scary, And I guess it's an interesting thing. Like, it feels funny. Like when I just said it's scary. That feels funny to me. Like that's such a non-scary technical thing, or it shouldn't be, or something. Right. Maybe it even helps to just acknowledge what scares us isn't being killed or the big terrible thing. What scares me is you seeing my fear, or you finding out that I don't know. Like for me, a big one would be you're finding out I don't know what to do.
Right.
And I don't have a solution. I can't solve this. Right. Like that scares me, right? But that it feels weak to say that.
Yeah.
Probably for almost any human, it feels weak to say that. Yeah. And that's probably why Brene Brown is so huge, right?
Yeah.
Like teaching people how to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, and I always say, look, life, it's hard for us to realize, but life always comes down to power. Like in the sense of, I feel powerless, and I want to grasp power. And and I think the reason that Jesus is hard for us is that Jesus says, I'm the ultimate, most powerful being, who then became the ultimate, most vulnerable being.
And then says, blessed are the meek.
Yeah, and he says, you want to follow me? The cross he invites us to take up is self-sacrifice, the vulnerability of like, I don't have power. Right. The only power I have is that I'm a steward of the Spirit of God who's in me. Right. Like in the sense that I don't even steward that Spirit, but I steward in the sense that I can either follow the Spirit of God or I can resist the Spirit of God. And, you have to step into that. And so the invitation of Jesus is how do you handle your neighbor? Be vulnerable to your neighbor. How do you handle your wife who's hard on you? Be vulnerable to your wife. What if that doesn't work? I'm here. I'm with you. Right. Well, I don't like this feeling. I don't like the feeling of being out of control. Yeah, I know. That's okay. Right. But I need to run a fight. No. Take a deep breath. I'm with you, and my purposes need to happen through you. Yeah. And you're like, I don't know. And some of the reason we're anxious is we don't want to take God's vision on. We don't. For those of us who understand it and know it and are still anxious, is we are ruled by our physiology, and we don't want to put on the purposes of God. We don't want to acknowledge the fact that we have choice. Famous saying of my mother's, good emotions follow good choices. Bad emotions follow bad choices.
So if you're having a bad emotion,
part of it is choosing to step into what's good.
Yeah.
And acknowledge that you have power to choose.
Right.
Now, theologically, do we want to go deal with how God's sovereignty works? No. The Bible's very clear that you have to deal with you in the moment.
And then there's an acknowledgement that God is in control as well, but it doesn't diminish that. It doesn't take that away. It doesn't give you an excuse. It's not why you can just say, well, if I'm going to change, it's because God changes me. I'll just be sitting here until then. That's a dangerous.
It's a very dangerous
thing. Yeah.
I mean, and I think when you make the choice, I always say make the choice because Jesus is trustworthy and he is the overseer of your soul. Like his wounds heals your soul. It's what brings this stony heart to life and gives it like beauty and power.
Well, and in saying that, you do contribute to that theological question because it's the work is to accept.
Yes.
The work is to receive.
Yeah.
And so it's not that, when you're, well, I'm going to have Jesus do that for me. Well, you're right, but you're going to have to receive what Jesus does for you and take it in and drink deeply of it and surrender to it or, such things, right? Like there is what God is offering, but there is a choice to receive it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are, we could talk about a lot of other things to deal with anxiety. When you think about your thoughts about God and about yourself and others, it's good to identify overarching ways that you tend to think. Are you one of those people who everything's bad? All my thoughts are always, you're caustic in the sense you're like the worst case scenario guy. Mm-hmm. That's what your emotions bring up. Or are you the one who's just your emotions bring up thoughts of running? You got to get out all the time. Like everything is just like, this is too bad. I got to escape.
Right.
Just even, identifying your ways of thinking is helpful because you're like, okay, that's not realistic. I can't.
This is me doing my knee-jerk thing.
Yes.
And so that needs to be questioned.
Yeah.
That's how I tend to have that thought process. Like,
that's good.
Here's me wanting to do what I want to do. That can't be, well, it likely isn't correct because I know this is my escape mechanism. This is where I just, plow in and yell back and use my words. I mean, I've got this thing where I'm very wary of my words, which is sometimes I should use them, but other times I have done some major damage with my words. Yeah. And so sometimes when I am not lashing back, it's because I'm sitting there going, I want to lash back. This cannot be the Spirit of God telling me to do this, right? And so and sometimes, anyway, I haven't always mastered that. Yeah. Especially when I'm pushed real hard to tell me what you're thinking right now. And then every once in a while, it's like, are you sure? Are you sure? Because I got something.
I got
something for you. Ooh-wee. But that kind of thing where it's like, this is what I do. This is how I solve. Jesus, help me.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do I walk with you in this?
And I think you and I had a little bit of a conversation beforehand about the Pentecostal community.
Yeah.
And in studying healing and from a perspective of how did Jesus heal, so I went through and taught on a series where I just tried to analyze each moment of the way that Jesus would heal people. Because if we're disciples and we're stepping into healing in our communities and in the world, how does he do it? Well, what's fascinating is the thing that he does both for the physical ailment and the spiritual ailment. He speaks with authority. He speaks with the ability to look into someone's like dignity, and as he honors them as image bearers.
Yeah.
He isn't just like whatever, I'll heal you. That's great.
Right.
Walk by me and I'll snap my fingers. No, he's very focused on their humanity. But even though the one I love is healing Peter's mother-in-law, he speaks with authority, the same authority casts out a demon to the fever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times us as what we would call evangelicals tend to not like the speaking with authority. But if you have anxiety, my first recommendation is that you speak with authority to your anxiety. And you say, this is not in the way of Jesus, anxiety. The way I feel, you can't feel this way. Like, I mean, it's okay to feel it, but this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
And I will ask you to go away in the name of God, like in the name of Jesus. Be gone, because this is not the way of Jesus. Jesus is a purpose and peace and power, not of anxiety and fear. This is not the way of God.
Yeah.
And even just being able to say, I have the authority through Jesus to walk through this is a powerful way of dealing with your anxiety.
Yeah.
And fear and anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's good. Well,
there you go.
Got any more nuggets, or should we?
I think I'm done
wrap that on up. Starting to feel some negative emotions over there.
Feeling negative emotions, exposure, vulnerability.
Run
away,
fight. All right. Well, just thanks for tuning in, and reminder that we're going and digging into The Chosen next week.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I have watched the first episode.
Oh, okay.
We're
first episode. On the 8th, I think.
I watched it with my wife. I don't think I'll have watched all the episodes by next week, but
yeah,
I've got a sense of the show so far.
Yeah, you've got a sense. It's we've kind of just sort of chugged through. It's been interesting.
I'm excited.
I don't have all my clear thoughts yet, but there's a lot there.
Yeah.
There's a lot to examine. And again, thanks for the questions in the email. They're great questions. Check them out, Eric. That'll give us some good stuff to get into. So anyway, thanks for joining us, and it means a lot that you listen. If you have a chance to rate us, that would be really, really helpful. That would mean a ton to us, and it would get this out to a few more folks. So I kind of went in and cruised some of the reviews, and I just want to say I appreciate them. It means a ton. I recognize some of those names, and we appreciate that you're listening. So
yes, thank you so much. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.